What happened when the undercover CEO walked into his own company and discovered a toxic workplace hidden beneath the surface? Employees lived in fear, a ruthless manager ruled with intimidation, and no one dared to speak up. Until the CEO himself saw it firsthand. This isn't just a story about power, it's about responsibility, courage, and the fight for a better workplace. Stay with us as we reveal how one man's undercover mission exposed the truth and sparked a revolution within his company. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire change. Logan Pierce, the owner of Sky Elite Aviation, had built his private aviation company from the ground up, priding himself on offering world-class service to elite clients. However, recent reports of high turnover and low employee morale in the maintenance division troubled him. Despite glowing executive reports, whispers of a toxic work culture had reached him through anonymous complaints. Employees seemed afraid to speak up, and several skilled mechanics had resigned without explanation. Logan had always believed that a company's success was measured not just by profit, but by how its employees were treated. If there was a problem festering within his company, he needed to see it with his own eyes. Instead of relying on filtered updates from managers, Logan decided to go undercover. He swapped his tailored suits for worn-out coveralls, a plain cap, and a name tag that simply read Logan J. Using an alias, he applied as a junior technician at his own hangar. With grease-stained hands and steel-toe boots, he blended in as just another new hire. His goal wasn't just to observe, he wanted to experience firsthand what his employees faced every day. He walked into the vast aircraft hangar, where private jets lined up like polished giants under bright industrial lights. Engines hummed in the background, and the smell of aviation fuel and metal filled the air. Logan's first impression of the work environment was far from welcoming. The moment he stepped onto the maintenance floor, he sensed an unspoken tension. Mechanics kept their heads down, working in silence. Conversations were kept brief, and no one smiled. It was as if an invisible force was pressing down on everyone, making the atmosphere heavy. It didn't take long for Logan to notice the source of fear. Damon, the maintenance supervisor. The man's voice boomed across the hangar, barking orders without a hint of respect. His interactions were laced with sarcasm and intimidation, and employees seemed to shrink in his presence. Logan knew right away. This wasn't a team, it was a workplace ruled by fear. He had seen enough. He was ready to uncover the truth. As Logan settled into his first shift as a junior aircraft technician, the reality of the hangar's toxic environment became painfully clear. The air inside the maintenance bay was thick not just with the scent of aviation fuel and grease, but with unease and quiet submission. Employees moved with mechanical efficiency, avoiding unnecessary conversation. The few interactions he witnessed were short and clipped, devoid of camaraderie. No laughter, no casual talk, only tense exchanges and eyes darting around as if constantly checking for someone watching. Logan soon realized that the source of this oppressive atmosphere was Damon, the maintenance supervisor. Every movement in the hangar seemed to revolve around his presence, as if the entire team operated under an unspoken rule: stay out of his way and you won't be a target. Damon was not a leader, he was a tyrant. His management style was built on fear and degradation, not teamwork or respect. Logan watched as Damon barked orders at the mechanics, publicly shaming them for minor mistakes and criticizing their work in front of others. Instead of providing constructive feedback, he humiliated employees, making them second-guess their skills. The most frequent target of his abuse was Riley, a young but highly skilled mechanic. Unlike others who had learned to stay silent, Riley still tried to prove themselves. But every effort was met with scorn. Logan observed how Damon singled Riley out for the toughest, most grueling tasks, assigning them menial jobs that should have been rotated among the team. Every time Riley spoke up, even with a valid concern, Damon would shut them down with mockery or cruel sarcasm. It wasn't just Damon's direct actions that made the workplace unbearable. It was the culture of silence he had created. No one challenged him. Even when mechanics saw injustice unfold, they turned a blind eye, either too afraid or too accustomed to the abuse to intervene. Logan noticed the subtle but telling signs: quick glances exchanged between workers, tension in their shoulders, the way they hurriedly returned to work whenever Damon was near. The fear had infected the entire team, making even those who weren't direct victims of Damon's mistreatment complicit in their silence. Logan clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to break cover and confront Damon right then and there. He knew that if he wanted to change this place, he had to see just how deep the damage ran. But one thing was already certain: this was not the company he thought he had built. Logan had seen enough signs of fear and tension in the hangar, but it wasn't until he witnessed Damon's abuse firsthand that the full extent of the toxic workplace culture became undeniable. It happened during a routine aircraft inspection, a critical process where mechanics checked for any safety concerns before a private jet could be cleared for flight. Logan had been assigned to assist Riley, who worked methodically, carefully double-checking each system to ensure compliance with aviation safety regulations. But the moment Damon arrived, the entire hangar seemed to shrink under his presence. His loud, mocking voice cut through the noise of tools and machinery. "What the hell is taking you so long, Riley?" Damon sneered, arms crossed as he towered over the mechanic. "Are you too slow, or just too stupid to handle a basic pre-flight check?" The insult hung in the air, and for a moment no one spoke. Logan could see the way Riley's hands tightened around their wrench, knuckles turning white. They were clearly holding back a response, forcing themselves to endure yet another round of humiliation. Logan, standing beside them, felt his jaw clench. This wasn't just strict supervision. This was deliberate and relentless belittlement. Riley opened their mouth, trying to explain that they were following protocol to ensure every safety measure was met, but Damon cut them off mid-sentence. "Spare me the excuses," he snapped. "If you weren't such a liability, maybe this hangar would run smoother." The words stung, not just for Riley, but for everyone who had been too afraid to speak up before. Logan glanced around and saw mechanics avoiding eye contact, acting as if they hadn't heard anything. It was clear this wasn't a one-time incident. This was routine abuse, and no one dared to intervene. Then, in a move that made Logan's blood boil, Damon grabbed Riley's checklist and ripped it in half, tossing it onto the ground. "You don't need this," he spat. "Just do what I tell you and stop acting like you know better than me." Logan felt a wave of anger surge through him, but he forced himself to remain composed. He wanted to confront Damon right then and there, to reveal who he was and fire the man on the spot. But he knew that if he wanted to truly fix this broken system, he needed to understand its roots first. Watching Riley pick up the torn checklist in silence, Logan realized just how much damage had already been done and just how much work he had ahead of him to make things right. Later that day, as Logan walked past the storage area near the maintenance bay, he heard a quiet, stifled sound. He stopped, listening more closely. It was someone crying. He stepped inside and found Riley hunched over on a bench, their hands gripping the edges of a metal toolbox as their shoulders trembled from suppressed sobs. The sight hit Logan harder than he expected. Seeing the strong-willed mechanic reduced to this state made the situation feel even more personal. He had suspected for days that Riley was struggling, but this moment confirmed just how much Damon's abuse had worn them down. Logan approached carefully, making sure not to startle them. "Hey," he said softly, "are you okay?" Riley quickly wiped their faces, trying to compose themselves. "I'm fine," they muttered, though their voice betrayed their exhaustion. They shook their heads, letting out a bitter laugh. "Who am I kidding? No, I'm not fine." Their hands clenched into fists as they continued, frustration bubbling over. "I bust my ass every day to do a good job, and it's never enough for him. Damon just keeps tearing me down. It doesn't matter how hard I work, he'll always see me as Logan could see the weight of self-doubt and frustration in their expression. This wasn't just about one bad day. This was months, maybe even years, of mistreatment chipping away at them. "Why haven't you reported him?" Logan asked carefully. Riley let out a deep sigh. "People have," they admitted, "but nothing ever changes. Management just looks the other way. Or worse, the ones who complain end up leaving because they can't take it anymore." They rubbed their temples, exhausted. "I love this job. I love working on planes. But I can't keep doing this if it means getting torn apart every single day. It's like..." They hesitated, voices faltering. "It's like he's trying to make me quit." Logan's hands curled into fists. That was exactly what Damon was doing. pushing talented people out by making their lives miserable, all while maintaining control over the rest through fear. This wasn't just a bad supervisor, it was a systematic failure of leadership. Logan took a deep breath, then placed a reassuring hand on Riley's shoulder. "You're not alone in this," he said firmly, "and you're not going anywhere. Things are about to change." Riley looked up, skepticism flickering in their tired eyes. "How? No one ever stands up to him." Logan's jaw tightened. They will now. The next day, Logan arrived at the hangar with a purpose. He had seen enough. It was time to end Damon's reign of intimidation. As he stepped onto the maintenance floor, he noticed the same tense atmosphere, employees working in silence, keeping their heads down, avoiding eye contact. But this time, Logan wasn't just an observer. He was here to take action. It didn't take long for things to escalate. Damon stormed across the hangar, barking orders as usual. His gaze landed on Riley, who was double-checking a hydraulic system on one of the private jets. Damon's face twisted into a sneer. "Still dragging your feet, huh? Maybe we should replace you with someone who actually knows what they're doing." His voice was dripping with condescension as he snatched the tools out of Riley's hands and tossed them aside. Logan's blood boiled. Enough was enough. He stepped forward. "Back off," Logan said, his voice calm but commanding. Damon turned, eyes narrowing as he looked Logan up and down. "And who the hell do you think you are?" he scoffed. Logan didn't break eye contact. Slowly, he reached up and removed his cap, revealing his face to the entire hangar. The room fell silent. Employees who had previously ignored the confrontation were now watching, eyes wide in shock. "My name's Logan Pierce," he said, his voice cutting through the heavy air. "I own this company." Damon's smirk disappeared instantly. The color drained from his face as realization set in. The man he had been belittling, ignoring, and dismissing was not just some random junior technician. He was the CEO of Sky Elite Aviation. For the first time, Damon looked uncertain. He took a step back, scrambling to recover. Mr. Pierce, I didn't realize." "I know you didn't," Logan interrupted. His voice remained steady, but there was an undeniable edge of authority. "And that's the problem." He glanced around at the employees. "I've been watching how you run this hangar, the way you treat your team, and let me make something very clear." He locked eyes with Damon. "Your time here is over." A collective hush fell over the hangar. Damon's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You can't do this," he stammered. Logan's expression was stone cold. "I just did." For a moment, the hangar remained eerily silent. The weight of Logan's words hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud, and every mechanic, engineer, and technician stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Damon, usually so full of arrogance, looked utterly speechless. His hands clenched at his sides as his mind scrambled for a way out of the situation, but there wasn't one. Logan had made his decision, and there was no room for negotiation. "You think you can just fire me like that?" Damon finally spat, his voice tinged with desperation. "I've been running this hangar for years. Without me, this place will fall apart." Logan's gaze didn't waver. "No," he said firmly. "Without you, this place will finally be able to thrive." He turned to the stunned employees, addressing them for the first time as their CEO. "If anyone else here believes that intimidation, bullying, and mistreatment belong in this company, you're free to walk out with him. Because starting today, this culture ends." The tension in the room slowly began to shift. Mechanics exchanged uncertain glances, some looking at the door, others at Logan. Then, one by one, they started nodding. Quiet at first, then stronger, relief spreading across their faces. For too long they had lived in fear, convinced that speaking up would only cost them their jobs. But now they saw a leader willing to take a stand, not just in words but in action. Damon let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You'll regret this," he muttered before grabbing his things and storming out. His footsteps echoed through the hangar, and when the doors slammed shut behind him, it was like a weight had finally been lifted off the entire team. Riley, standing nearby, looked stunned. They had spent so long believing that nothing would change, that reporting Damon was pointless. Now, for the first time, they felt heard. Logan met their gaze and gave them a reassuring nod. "You don't have to work under fear anymore," he said. "No one does." A slow ripple of applause started from the back of the hangar, growing louder as mechanics and staff began clapping, first in cautious approval, then with real emotion. For the first time in a long time, they weren't just surviving in this workplace. They were hopeful. Logan exhaled. This was only the beginning. The real work, rebuilding a culture of respect and integrity, was just getting started, and he was ready for it. With Damon gone, the hangar felt different, lighter, as if a storm had finally passed. But Logan knew that firing one toxic manager wasn't enough. If real change was going to happen, it had to be systemic, not just symbolic. A company's culture doesn't change overnight, and Sky Elite Aviation needed more than just a dramatic confrontation. It needed reform. The very next day, Logan called for a mandatory meeting with all employees in the maintenance division. Unlike previous meetings where workers sat stiffly, afraid of saying the wrong thing, there was a new energy in the room, a cautious but undeniable hope. Logan stood before them, no longer in disguise, but still just as determined. "I came down here to see what was really happening in my company," he told them, his voice steady and sincere, "and what I saw was unacceptable. No one should come to work in fear. No one should be made to feel like they don't belong." He paused, scanning the room. This time employees were looking at him. Not avoiding his gaze, not shrinking away, they were listening. To ensure long-term change, Logan announced a series of reforms. First, a confidential reporting system would be implemented, so employees could report mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Second, leadership training would be mandatory for all supervisors to prevent another Damon from rising in the ranks. Lastly, Logan made it clear that respect and integrity would be the foundation of Skyleet's future. "A business is only as strong as its people," he said, "and it's time we start valuing ours the way they deserve." The impact was immediate. Employees who had once worked in silence and fear began opening up about their experiences. Conversations in the break room shifted from hushed whispers to real discussions. Riley, once a target of constant abuse, was promoted to lead technician, a sign that skill and hard work, not intimidation, would define success in the company. As Logan walked through the hangar later that day, he no longer saw a broken workforce. He saw a team, one that was finally free to thrive. He had come undercover to find the truth, and in doing so, he had given his employees something even greater, a future where they no longer had to live in fear. And for the first time in a long time, Sky Elite Aviation was finally soaring. The story of Logan Pierce's undercover mission at Sky Elite Aviation teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, workplace culture, and the courage to create change. True leadership isn't about authority or titles, it's about responsibility. Logan could have ignored the complaints, trusted polished reports, and remained in his executive office. Instead, he chose to step into the reality of his employees. Witnessing firsthand the struggles they faced, his actions proved that leaders must be present, engaged, and willing to confront uncomfortable truths. Another key takeaway is that silence allows toxicity to thrive. Damon was able to abuse his power for so long because employees felt powerless to challenge him. However, the moment Logan took a stand, the entire workplace shifted. This highlights the importance of speaking up, supporting those who are mistreated, and fostering an environment where employees feel safe and valued. Most importantly, the story shows that real change isn't just about removing one bad leader. It's about rebuilding a culture. Logan didn't just fire Damon, he implemented long-term reforms to ensure no one else suffered the same way. His story reminds us that one act of courage can transform an entire system, and it only takes one leader to start it.